I'm obliged to you, sir. Good afternoon to parliamentary colleagues. Good afternoon to our guests. Good afternoon to the people of Barbados on this island and in the diaspora. Your Honor, I want to begin in a fairly unusual fashion, but it is a fashion that demands some attention. Just before I left home, I received the message from a parent. She describes herself as a parent, and she's asking me on this day to bring attention to the matter, and I ask you to allow me to read it. It is not offensive in any way. In fact, I will ask the House to join me in acknowledging the message from this parent. Her child has Down syndrome. It says, "Good morning, Mr. Thorne. This needs to be addressed." Thank you. Thank you. There is no mention of Down syndrome here. These children and adults are also in the special needs section, and they're forgotten. Disability is disability, and we need to be included in whatever is being shared out, not left out. We intend to come out in force to have our children recognized. Thursday, 21st March, is World Down Syndrome Day. So receiving this news today, Tuesday, 19th of March, is not good news. Our children need to be included. I say children because our adults function as children. We have to make decisions for them. The Down Syndrome Association of Barbados is asking you to speak on our behalf. We need a voice for our children. Would you be that voice? And she describes herself as a concerned parent. I will not disclose her name, just her initials, JG. And she's left her address as well. And she will now be pleased to note that the Honorable Prime Minister has joined in.
On a point of elucidation, and I thank the Leader of the Opposition for raising it. In fact, before he spoke, the Honourable Member for St. James North, who chaired the Disabilities Commission, raised the issue with me, and we agreed that in my wrap-up tomorrow night, I will speak because, as you know, under the for the record, but I say to you that it is government's intention to reach all those who are disabled.
If that were to be the full extent of the Prime Minister's wrap-up, I suspect I may be quite relieved. Your Honor, a writer once said, reality is not what you think it is what you experience. I quote that because fresh in my mind is the Honorable Prime Minister's speech that I heard yesterday. The language was used about a mood, putting us into a mood. And that seemed to be an appeal to the sensations. I wish to, in my own delivery, contrast against the intention of the Prime Minister, the Honourable Prime Minister. And instead of appealing to the sensations, I want to appeal to the experience of the people of this country, since my views accord with those of the writer who said, reality is not what you think it is what you experience. I go to page 141 of the Honourable Prime Minister's speech yesterday. And it reads, Mr. Speaker, Barbados is abuzz with activity, confidence, and positive economic indicators. I respectfully beg to differ. If Barbados is abuzz with activity, it is not the kind of activity that will provoke the applause that came from the Honourable Member for Christchurch East. If Barbados is abuzz with confidence, it is not a confidence in the immediate future. And as to positive economic indicators, that must be what some feel or what some think, but it certainly is not the experience of the majority of people in this country. I am advised to correct something that the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, the Honourable Prime Minister, said yesterday, that the national debt in 2018 was 18.1 billion. I am advised that several writers, academic writers, who have studied the Barbados model in 2018 reject that. And that in fact, they list the national debt in 2018 at 15.84 billion. I relate my speech today to the experience of this country. My speech is not related to what people think. Unless one has the powers that were given to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, what the people in this country feel is the extreme heat of an economy which is performing poorly, of an economy in which inflation is rampant, an economy in which inflation is further impoverishing the poor, or marginalizing the poor, and bringing the middle back into poverty that they would have experienced before their social elevation. And what if I were to tell this country, and if I were to tell this government, that extreme hardship and poverty portends for this country? What if I were to say that to this government? And what if I were to challenge any member of this government to walk into their constituency
Please, let the honourable member speak, please.
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
I will protect you, honourable member. I will protect you, honourable member.
I am so obliged to you. You see, I sympathize particularly with the front bench. They don't get a lot of chances to talk, especially on Thursdays. So that I can bear the interruptions. If interrupting me is for you therapeutic, I will hear it. I know you don't get any opportunities to speak on Thursdays at cabinet meetings. So please, Your Honor.
Honourable member, I can only try. I will try my utmost to protect you.
To protect me?
Yes, from...
I'm trying to protect them. I am promoting their interests. I am promoting their right to speak in a cabinet that does not allow them to speak. And what if I were to tell you, Your Honor, that extreme hardship and poverty portends for this country? country in which economic growth, in spite of the claims of the Honorable Prime Minister yesterday, economic growth does not exist in Barbados. I come to this task this evening with a sense of honor and duty. I accept the honor, but must now do my duty. Do my duty to the people of this country who expect that this government must face the questions that the people want to ask of this government. This is my reply. And to reply is to answer the government. To reply is to ask questions, even of a reluctant government. To reply is to ask questions of this reluctant government. To reply is to call upon this government to give account. To reply is to call upon this government to defend its trusteeship of the vast amounts of the people's money that it is spending. And I will come to that with specificity. And it will not make the people of this country happy. To reply is to call upon government to explain the wisdom of the means by which it accumulates the people's money. To reply is to call on this government to defend its social and economic policy. To reply is to call on government to be transparent. Is that too much to ask? To reply is to ask government to be honest with the people and with their money. Is that too much to ask? To reply is to ask government to do its labors with integrity. Is that too much to ask? To reply is to ask government to pursue the common good and to cease the detestable practice of individual reward in government. Is that too much to ask? To reply is to ask the government to do right by the people of Barbados. Is that too much to ask? And if that is too much to ask, then you become a government that has lost the moral right to govern. And we, the citizens, will demand a return to good government. And so I ask the question again, what if I were to tell you that extreme hardship and poverty portends for Barbados? If any of you in this government is living without a visit to the supermarket or the marketplace, if any of you is living insulated from many of your constituents who endure hardship, then you may not be aware of what pertains for the people of this country. I accept that there are those who will deny the portent of extreme hardship that is upon this country. There are those who will deny it. And they will deny it because of their partisan interests. They support the party that constitutes this government. But when they apply conscience to their reason, when they apply conscience to their reason, will they really put the narrow interests of a political party before the rights of a hungry child? Does any member of this government know if any child of a constituent went to bed hungry last night? Does any member of this government know if any child of a constituent went to school without breakfast this morning? It is not what we think. It is what the children in this country are experiencing. because their parents are finding visits to the supermarkets a tortuous exercise under the administration of this government. So there are those who will deny for partisan interests. There's a second group that will deny, and that group is the unaware. And they will be unaware because an honorable Prime Minister will say to this country, and I quote, "We've had 11 consecutive quarters of growth." 11 consecutive quarters of growth. And coming from high authority, there are persons who will accept it. And they will accept it if it is a view embraced by certain other high officials who occupy the top floor of certain buildings, tall buildings in Bridgetown. They may well accept that because the statement comes from high authority. They are the unaware. 11 consecutive quarters of growth. But we feel relieved that those two categories of persons may be converted to the truth. They may be. As I said, when conscience meets reason, even in the most private moments, people do accept the truth, in spite of partisan affiliation, in spite of misinformation. So I'm not bothered about those two groups. The third group about which I'm bothered is the group that I describe as the indifferent. Those who don't care. For one reason or another, they may not care. Those who live in the midst of human suffering and will not care. That is the group. That is the problematic group in this country. And I point no fingers at anyone. But as politicians, we have a duty to ensure, and I believe Owen Arthur used to say it all the time, that our mission in this political exercise is to ensure that poor people stop being poor. And if those who subscribe to the scriptures literally will insist that the poor will always be with us, there are those of more libertarian view who believe that we have a duty to at some time be that good Samaritan that will stop and help a man or a woman or a child. Let me pause. I think I owe it to this country to remind that these views that I hold are not recent views. On the occasion of the budget speech last year, I spoke of the marginalized in this country. I spoke of the thousands of workers who were sent home. Of course, on that occasion, I said it to applause. I said it to applause from the same hands that dangle at the sides of the members of this government. This year, I say the same thing. Parliament is silent. That is what you call partisan politics. And when partisan politics casts you into the category of the indifferent, I say you forfeit the right. You forfeit the right to hold the view that you now say you hold. And I say to you further, Mr. Speaker, that my conscience, my location here is related to my conscience. I said it last year. And this year I'm saying the same thing. And I say to the people of Barbados, I am saying it with greater freedom this time. Political freedom. And it is not only political freedom, but it is the truth. The truth I told last year is an enduring truth this year. It is well with my soul. To the people of Barbados who have met me since I have crossed the floor, I say how overwhelmed I am. My parliamentary colleagues in here are not aware of it. They are not aware of what is happening in this country. They are not aware that there's a groundswell of opposition to this government, because their reality is what they think. My reality is what I experience out there. That there are people in this country who now celebrate the fact that at least one of us has had the courage, has had the conviction, has had the moral fortitude to oppose wrongdoing in government. And I say a government is engaging in wrongdoing when it sends home the most vulnerable people in this country. The people who during COVID and the dust storms that y'all like to talk, that they like to talk about, Your Honor. Beg your pardon, sir. The people who kept this country clean. And the gratitude that this government visited upon them was that when the country became clean, they were clean out of jobs. And the people in this country silently are waiting to give this government a message. But perhaps this government's reality is what this government thinks. But the reality out there is that there's much suffering among the people of this country. And I'm not only speaking of the poor people of this country. There are middle-class people in this country who are afraid to open the light bill. There are middle-class people in this country who, when they reach the cash register in the supermarket, they get nervous. That's the objective reality. What is this government's reality? Is this a happy band of campers who revel in numbers? Who revel in numbers and who take comfort in large numbers against a sentiment in the public domain that you are not doing well, that they are not doing well, Your Honor, by the people of this country, that they have lost their freedoms. And I come to this task recognizing that there was legitimate opposition to this government for a while. And that legitimate opposition was extra-parliamentary. There were voices of protest against the high winds of government's indifference and injustice. Except, Your Honor, they did not have a voice in here. And I come to this task with humility. And I come to it with honor, a sense of honor. And I will not resile from my duty to be that representative voice of the suffering people out there who are burdened under the weight of an indifferent government. Today, the people can say that in this parliament, we have a voice. Today, the people can say that in this parliament, we have a party. Today, the people can say that in this parliament, we have a movement. Today, the people can say that in this parliament, we have a moral cause. And when a certain tomorrow comes, the people will say, we claim our country back. And I trust that that will be a reality that this government can live with for the sake of your own well-being. We want our country back. And what has happened to this country? This country has been visited by a certain cynicism. It feels as if it is devoid of a soul, and that the human condition is without worth unless attached to it is material wealth. This government presides over a country that has lost its soul, and that is regrettable. This government promotes a culture, I said it before and I'll say it again, of revelry and vulgar materialism. It will ignore the poor except for their vote. This government will ignore the poor except for their vote and find no value in their lives. A government such as this will never seek to elevate the poor if the poor continues to vote for the government. The government then becomes invested in the poverty that afflicts the lives of the poor. You give them handouts. Christmas comes, you give them a handout. Crop over comes, you give them a ticket. I know that disguised behind the laughter and smiles is a conscience that is active. But it's fine, you can disguise your conscience with smiles and laughter. That is fine. But I believe that there are some among you, even among you, who may have a conscience, who may say, I am not indifferent. I am not indifferent to the suffering of the people of this country. And where there are means for elevation, this government will destroy those means. Mr. Speaker, I will continue to resist this government in its attempt to destroy the one institution that gave to this country its freedom, democracy, and justice. I say to you, Your Honor, in the hearing of the Honorable Prime Minister of this country, do not touch education unless those reforms in education are progressive. There's a large percentage of this population which understands what education has done for this country. We understand it. Many of us did not read about race and class in any textbook. For us, it was not an academic enterprise. We lived it. We lived it. And having lived class in this country, we understand why we will say, and that our voices will reverberate across this chamber and across this country. And we mean it when we say it, and we say it because we mean it. Do not touch education unless those reforms are curricular. But I can point to large conurbations across this country. Large conurbations which did not exist in the 1950s and the 1960s and the early 1970s. I lived it, Mr. Speaker. I know of what I speak. I lived it. The honorable member for St. James South represents a constituency which lived education. That conurbation that stretches from the University of the West Indies down to what we call, in those days, the Venezuela Project, housing project. If the honorable member does not know this, she will become indebted for the education. That the honorable member represents a portion of this landscape, and not this landscape, but this human scape, whose progress, whose elevation has been directly related to that revolutionary moment of 1961.